So the issue is green eggs and ham, apparently. So if you've been keeping up, and I'm more interested in how Doomcock is going to react to this because it's pretty silly, but I do think there is legitimate cause for concern. But I don't think it's censorship. So what's going on? Well, essentially, Dr. Seuss, or the corporation that controls Dr. Seuss and his writings and images, is deciding to basically desist publishing certain of the Dr. Seuss books. Now, I actually read a lot of Dr. Seuss growing up. I don't think this is a major loss, however. I do like the books a lot, but I'm sort of like, whatever. Because again, the problem here is this is a corporation restricting its own output. So good or bad, it's sort of like, if for whatever reason, Fox, when it was Fox and not owned by Disney, decided, you know what, we're just not going to continue the Predator series for whatever reason. That wouldn't be censorship. That would just be, they're just not going to put out certain material. You can call it self-censorship. That might be true, but they have ownership of the material. I mean, I thank God that George R. R. Martin still retains the copyright to his books. So if they ever tried to pull this thing, he would immediately stop it. He's very, very strong on censorship. He does not allow it at all. And I'm very grateful. But, people like Stephen King have become less absolutist. He used to be totally against censorship, but more recently he's like, in some cases I will want my books not to be out there to be recalled. Because he was very disturbed that some people read a few of the books and did some horrific things. And he's sort of like, I don't know if I want that out there. Now, I disagree with Stephen, but again, if he has ownership of the property, he can decide, I don't want it out there. Now, fans can still try to get the old copies and things like that. So we're kind of stuck where if the creator has the intention, I don't want the material out there anymore, they should respect the wishes of the creator, and then versus, there should not be any kind of censorship. So, of course, Doom is going to have a little bit of fun with all this thing and Disney being tied up in knots. But I think, again, as he at least accurately notes, the issue is here restricting the content.
From the evils of Swiss Family Robinson with this ban. In its March 11th article, Rebel News wrote, quote, "The beloved children's movie Dumbo is no longer accessible to children using the streaming platform Disney Plus because of stereotypical portrayals of minorities in the film. Dumbo, alongside several other films including Peter Pan, Swiss Family Robinson, and the Aristocats, have been classified as racist. The ban was initially made in October 2020, but has since picked up controversy on social media following the cancellations of Dr. Seuss, Pepe Le Pew, and the attempted cancellation of Speedy Gonzales. At the time, Disney Plus explained that each film was removed from the Kids Profile library due to the inclusion of unwoke content that was produced as a product of its time. According to Disney, the 1941 film Dumbo features singing crows, beloved characters by all who saw the movie as children, depicted as stereotypical black characters. Peter Pan and Swiss Family Robinson were cut from the lineup for their exaggerated portrayals of Native Americans and Asian pirates, respectively. The Aristocats, a musical featuring cats, was canceled for its depiction of two Siamese cats who speak in an exaggerated Asian accent and play the piano with chopsticks. Although the movies will be inaccessible to children, they remain available to adults with the addition of disclaimers warning viewers of, quote, negative depictions and or mistreatment of people or cultures, unquote. With more on the Toonpocalypse, we turn to our senior correspondent for the apocalypse, the Eldritch God himself, my best friend and arch nemesis, Harvey Cthulhu. Harvey, what do you make of all this?
It's a really shitty time to be a toon, Doomcock. Dr. Seuss got canceled by his own family. Pepe Le Pew can no longer chase pussy. Cats. And God forbid Speedy Gonzales should speak in a Mexican accent.
So in the case of Disney, what they're doing is they're going to restrict certain content like Dumbo. You can still see it, so it's not outright censorship, but you can't let children see it. So they're going to restrict the access, which I think is a little bit like, it's unclear where we are now. All right, so, I don't really disagree with him, but again, this is probably not the place to be even outraged because, again, restrictions are really, really difficult to parse. I can remember in the 1980s, they finally got around to labeling music with explicit stickers. And that was a big issue with labeling music with explicit stickers for a while. And you're kind of like, is this censorship? I think the answer is yes. And people like Rage Against the Machine were very vehement in protesting that. On the other hand, retrospectively, I'm like, well, it is just labeling something. It is the intent to censor, right? They just couldn't censor it outright, so they had to try to find a way to make it less profitable to carry a certain record. And I'm sure it did have a bit of a chilling effect. But is it censorship? The answer is, well, no, it's labeling it. You're still letting it out there. You can access the content, but you have a warning signal. And you're kind of like, well, should you have any warning signal at all? And that's a tough one. It's not clear. And that's all Disney really did. It said, well, you can see the content, but it will have XY images. It will have a sort of warning label up front. And you're like, well, that's right. That's still censorship. I don't want that warning label. And the answer is, well, you can pay for the property. If you pay for the whole thing, if you pay for Dumbo, all of it, you can do whatever you want with it. You can alter it. You can put the warning label. You cannot put the warning label. So this is like a little bit like I get where he's going with it, but it's like, this isn't technically much of an issue. If you attach a warning label, you're attaching a warning label. That's much harder to be against. Again, if the material has adult aspects, and let's be honest, sometimes Disney cartoons do, sometimes Dr. Seuss did, is it okay to have a kind of warning signal to say, well, this may contain certain offensive content? You're like, And again, it's very hard for me because it's like something like Nirvana, which I really like, but it's got a song like "Rape Me" in there. It's really hard to pass it off to say, well, it's just like any other song. It's like, no, the whole point of that song is to be very explicit, or a Public Enemy record that has a lot of curse words, or an NWA record that has a lot of curse words. It's kind of like, it's not right to say, well, it's like any other album, even ones that don't have curse words. It's like, no, that's ridiculous. Clearly, manifestly, a Snoop Dogg record, a Nirvana record, so on and so forth, will have explicit content that other records will not have. Are we censoring it by labeling it? I don't know. I think that's a tough one. I think even if you're totally against censorship, you're like, I don't know. This one's more of a question mark. The Dr. Seuss thing itself is kind of silly. I mean, I'd be worried if they're going to substantially change the Grinch, if they stop making him greedy. And I'd be like, okay, that's probably taking things too far. But this is an actual literature which people forget of young children's books, which were literally meant to sort of teach ethnic stereotypes. So this is one of those dilemmas where it's like, well, the literature itself is gone, so people don't know the context, so you can read the books and not pick up on these things. But it's sort of like, I don't know. This one's a more I don't know. So him trying to make some outrage over it's kind of like, well, I know that's his business, but it's like, I don't know what the joke is here. It's like, okay, we're gonna create soy boys. That doesn't make sense because believe me, when I was growing up, they were already starting to do this thing, starting to take away the content. And a lot of these kids have now grown and they become like him, right? They're becoming like angry YouTubers. So it clearly didn't work restricting the content. But I don't know. I'm more of a George Martin person, so I don't believe in the Stephen King stance, but I do respect, a creator saying, I just don't want this material out there. And in this case, obviously Dr. Seuss, it's a corporate thing, but in a Stephen King case, it could be the creator's like, no, I just don't want it out there. So it's like, that's a tough one. That's a genuinely tough one. All right, this has been a Popcult Analyze on this controversy on when and where to restrict content in this new media age. Thanks for listening.